Let's go ahead and jump in now to look at some problems for our learning goal. Once again, our learning goal is I can recognize that a digit in one place represents 10 times as much as it represents in the place value to its right, and 1/10 of what it represents in the place to its left. Okay, so number one says, what's the value of the 6 in the following numbers? Well, for A, the value of 6 here is 6,000. So I could write that. I could also write 6 times 10, 6 times 1,000, or we could write 6 times 10 to the third power. So either one of these variations right here would suffice as the value of this 6 that's in the thousands place. Let's take a look at B. B has the 6 in the tens place, which makes that 60. But I could also write it as 6 times 10, or I could write it as 6 times 10 to the first power. Okay, let's take a look at this last one here for C. This 6 is in the tenths place, tenths, right? So that really represents 0 and 6 tenths, which I could write that as 6 times 1/10, or we could write it as 6 times 1 over 10 to the first power, or we could write it with a negative exponent as saying 6 times 10 to the negative 1. All four of those, there's the 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. All four of those would be acceptable answers that we could put for C. Number 2. Alright, number 2 says, what is the value of 8 in the following numbers? So this is similar to number 1, but now we're dealing with a different number. We're dealing with 8. For A, the 8 is in the hundredths place, so this would be 0 and 8 hundredths, right? We could also write that as 8 times 1/100th, or I could write it as 8 times 1 over 10 to the second power, or we could write it as 8 times 10 to the negative 2. All right, let's take a look at B. B, this 8 is in the, not the thousands, but the 10,000s. So this is really 80. This 8 represents 80,000. Okay, which we could write as 8 times 10,000, right? Or we could write as 8 times 10 to the what? 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth power. Okay. Let's take a look at C, the last one. C has the 8 in the ones place, so that would just represent 8, which I could write as 8 times 1, or I could write as 8 times 10 to the 0 power, because remember, anything to the 0 power equals 1. All right, so let's put that back here. Anything, okay, anything to the 0 power equals 1. So the fact that 10 to the 0, if I had 7 to the 0, that's 1. If I had 10 to the 0, that equals 1. If I had 100 to the 0th power, that equals 1. If I had 2 to the 0 power, that equals 1. Number 3. Number 3 says, finish the statement to correctly compare the values of the underlying digits. So this first digit here, oops, I covered up the underline part, but this first one here, that 7 is in the hundredths place, right? So we could write that 7 represents 700. What about this 7 over here? This 7 is in the tens place, so that 7 represents 7D. All right, and let's think about what are the other ways we could write 700. We could say it as 7 times 100, or we could say it 7 times 10 to the second power. And for 70, we could write that as 7 times 10, or we could write that as 7 times 10 to the first power. All right, so let's take a look at A. A says the 7 in the hundred place represents, well, we just answered that, represents 700. The 7 in the tens place represents 70 because it's 7 tens, right? 7 times 10. Now, C, the 7 in the hundreds place is blank times as much as the 7 in the tens place. All right, well, let's break this sentence down. The 7 in the hundreds place, that's 700. All right, oh, let me put my box around it. 700s place. All right, where it says is, that's an equal sign. Our blank, we're gonna keep that with a question mark for now. So here's our question mark. Okay. We have another symbol. It says times as much as, so that would represent our multiplication symbol. And then we have 7 in the tens place. Well, 7 in the tens place represents 70. So really, we're trying to figure out what times 70 equals 700. Well, if we wanted to solve this, the question mark, the blank, is equal to, we would just divide 700 divided by 70, which makes our question mark equal to 10. So, after all of that, the 7 in the hundreds place is 10 times as much as the 7 in the tens place. Okay? All right, let's take a look at D. Now for D, let's break this one down. It says the 7 in the tens place is blank of the value of the 7 in the hundreds place. So let's try this now. We have the 7 in the tens place, right? 7 in the tens place represents 70. Is represents our equal sign. We're going to keep a question mark right here. So our question mark is our blank because we don't know what that is right now. And then it says of, right? Let's get another color here. Yellow or orange. Yellow. This of the value of, okay, of the value just means multiply. And then the last thing, the 7 in the hundreds place, which represents 700. So now we're trying to figure out what times 700 equals 70. Well, once again, if I want to solve for my question mark, okay, my question mark is equal to 70 divided by 700. And if we do this properly, I can reduce, this is going to reduce to 7 over 70. So our question mark reduces to 7 over 70. But we can reduce that again. And we know that both of these can be divided by 7. So our question mark really equals 1/10. So to answer this question over here, the 7 in the tens place is 1/10 of the value of the 7 in the hundreds place. Number 4. Number 4 says explain how the digit 3 in the numbers 137 and 643 are different. Well, first we want to start out by identifying the 3 and the digit 3 in each of the numbers. This 3 represents 30, while this 3 represents 3. So, what are some things we could say? One thing that we could say that 30 is 10 times larger than 3. Or we could say 3 is 1/10 of 30.